Mr Deputy President. You've got to say, Mr Deputy President, this government's true north is bad process. Unerringly, that is where this government heads every single time. Mr Deputy President, whether it's bad process by design, as in the case of the carbon tax, whether it's bad process through sheer incompetence, as in the case of the mining tax, or bad process as a cover to rig an outcome, as we're seeing with the referendum. Mr Deputy President, there is only one threshold that should be required to be passed in order for there to be equal funding for a yes case and a no case, and that should be that there are two sides to the argument. That should be that there are two ways of voting, that there are two options for voting, yes or no. That is the only threshold that should be passed in order for there to be equal funding for both cases in a referendum campaign, Mr Acting Deputy President. There is, I think, Mr Acting Deputy President, amongst, I thought, all parliamentarians, a sense that in a legal capacity, in a legal sense, that there is something bordering the sacred when it comes to the Constitution, and that any change to the Australian Constitution, all parliamentarians would approach with great sobriety, with great sincerity, with great solemnity, because the Constitution is the overarching legal framework within which our system of government operates. I had thought that regardless of the views that any side of politics might have in relation to a proposal to change the Constitution, that is something that all parliamentarians could agree upon, that it was serious business, that we should approach it in that fashion, and that regardless of which side of the argument any Member of Parliament found themselves on, that they would support the yes case and the no case being equally put. And a fundamental part of a yes case and a no case being equally put is equal resources, because you cannot have equality in terms of the public debate for the yes case and the no case when you only have one side substantially funded. And there is only one conclusion that you can draw when the government of the day seeks to put significant resources for one side of the argument and minimal resources for the other side of the argument, and that is that the government of the day wants to rig the outcome, that the government of the day wants to skew the outcome. Now, we have no issue at all with the government of the day arguing vigorously for a particular position. No issue. That is not what is in question here. What is in question here is the complete and absolute abrogation of what has been a cross-party, bipartisan Australian convention that when any proposition to change the Australian Constitution is put forward, that both sides are presented equally, fairly and funded accordingly. Mr Albanese has come up with this bizarre new concept that the resources which are to be allocated to the various sides of the argument are dependent upon the number of people who vote a particular way in the Australian Parliament. Well, not in the Australian Parliament, in his reckoning, just in the House of Representatives. But even if both chambers' voting patterns were looked at, it is still a bizarre and new threshold that Mr Albanese has set. The only conclusion to draw is that the government are worried about the strength of their ability to mount a particular case. Now, there are people who have, on this side of the chamber, who have different views. But I think there's one thing that unites everyone on this side of the chamber, regardless of whether they see a need to change the Constitution, regardless of whether they hope to see a yes vote successful. One thing that unites everyone on this side of the chamber, and that is a desire to see a fair and accurate reflection of the Australian people having been fully informed. That is the only thing that Mr Albanese should take into account with this proposition, and for those reasons, Mr Acting Deputy President, further consideration of the legislation should be deferred until this issue is resolved.